Hey guys, Swapshop here with a video on the newly released jungle Braum. Seeing as he is the newest champion in the league, I thought I would take him for a spin in the jungle as he looks kind of fun. I played around with him and I feel confident enough to give you guys some general idea as to what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are, and whether or not he's just any good overall as a jungler. So long story short, is jungle Braum any good? Well, basically, no, not really. He's one of those people that can work in the jungle, although you can say that about probably the majority of champions. He does have his fair share of downsides though, and is heavily outclassed by other junglers. If you haven't already, I suggest you watch the Braum Champion Spotlight. I'll put a link to that in the description. That'll give you a good idea of his overall abilities. And because he is the newest champion, when I describe his abilities, I'll probably be using a lot of comparisons to already existing characters, just to give you a better idea of what it's like. So first and foremost, before labeling jungle Braum as good or bad, we have to really understand what makes a jungler good and bad. What are the criteria? Now, there are a huge amount of factors that determine whether or not a champion is going to perform well in the jungle or not. So stuff like CC, clear speed, sustain, dueling power, stuff like that. Some factors are obviously more important than others, and the biggest misconception is around CC. Whereas you would think that is an extremely important feature for a jungler to have, if you look in the examples of Master Yi and Shyvana, they have no CC, but because they can clear so fast and because their duels are so good, they don't need that CC, they just simply have a different playstyle, one that doesn't revolve around heavy ganking. However, if you look at some champions which do have huge amounts of CC and in theory pretty good ganks, so like Thresh and Leona, whereas they can work as junglers, they aren't as good as a lot of other champions simply because they don't make up for it in other areas. In addition to this, champions often have a weakness in one area that is made up by a strength in another. So say for example, someone who is vulnerable early to invades are often good champions later on in team fights, so someone like a Mumu. However, if you look at someone who is good at invades early, good at dueling, they often fall off later on when it does come to those team fights, so like with Shaco. And that's where the problems come in with junglers who just aren't very good. If they are vulnerable early but don't scale well into the late game, what is the point of picking those champions? There's very little upside to them. So that's the theory behind the criteria, and where does this leave jungle Braum? As with any jungler, the first check mark you have to look at is with your clear speeds, and with jungle Braum it is really quite awful. Braum has one offensive ability and it is really not that good for clearing the jungle. This ability, which is his Q, is kind of comparable to Kha'Zix's W, however it doesn't hit more than one target and it doesn't heal you. His W is literally useless when it comes to clearing, and his E is pretty bad, but it does at least reduce some of the damage you take. But again, neither of those two abilities help with his clear speeds because they're not offensive in any way, shape or form. However, Braum does have his passive, which compared to other junglers is actually pretty good for clearing the jungle. It's hard to draw a comparison with Braum's passive, so like I say, you should really take a look at the champion spotlight to get a good idea. But basically it's kind of similar to how Vi's W works. Instead it takes 4 hits instead of 3. Once you hit that 4th time, it stuns the opponent. Braum's passive also has a cooldown for the same target, so you can't keep stunning that person over and over and over, similar to how Jarvan's passive works. And during the time while your passive is on cooldown to that target, you do bonus damage to them. And this is the part which benefits Braum when he's clearing the jungle, however it's not really enough to make up for his lack of abilities elsewhere. His ganking is also hit and miss. His Q is a pretty good ability for engaging ganks and for locking targets down with a nice slow, and his passive can get a stun off too, but he also relies on his team quite a lot in order to follow up that gank. In addition to this, Braum's kit revolves more around protecting people than being aggressive, so when you're going for that gank, it doesn't really work so well. The reason why Braum's ganks are so hit and miss is because your Q can be blocked by minions, which makes it very unreliable, and also you have no gap closer to help you apply your passive. You have your W, which allows you to jump to friendly characters, whether that is minions or allied champions, and that does help you, but that only works in that certain situation. If your enemy is isolated from allies, then you do not have any form of gap closer to help you out. However, once your ulti is up, your ganks improve tremendously and it's very easy to get some kills. However, it does have a very high cooldown at those early ranks and before you've built some CDR. And because both Braum's clear speeds and his ganks are quite lackluster, this puts him in a really awkward position. You're not really sure what to do with him. You can't just run around the map ganking 24/7 because, well, your ganks aren't that good, and you can't just sit in the jungle farming all the time because you're not quick enough. At the end of the day, as a jungler, you are very solitary. You have to be able to fend for yourself in a lot of situations, whether that's clearing the jungle, whether that's running around making plays, or whether that's just defending yourself from the enemy jungler. However, Braum is not designed to be on his own. Braum's kit relies heavily around being with an ally and protecting them and interacting with them. To this extent, when you stick him on his own, he performs quite subpar, and I found myself, when I was playing as a jungler, I was often behind the enemy Braum who would be playing as a support, just because of all the bonuses that supports have nowadays in gold income. So in conclusion, jungle Braum falls short in pretty much every desirable aspect. He wasn't designed to be a jungler, and it really does show. However, like I said at the top of the video, you can play jungle Braum if you want to do that, and he's pretty fun just as a character in general. So if you do want to go ahead and do that, I'm going to leave this little graphic on the screen which shows you what I like to run when I play jungle Braum. But as always, thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Good luck if you decide to go play some Braum in the jungles, and I will see you in my next video.